clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1540, a bill to provide for the imposition of sanctions with respect to forced organ harvesting within the People's Republic of China and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Shusky, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this issue.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchanges of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 1540, Mr. Perry's Falun Gong Protection Act. For decades, the House of Representatives has been raising alarms about organ harvesting perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party. We spoke about it earlier. As United Nations human rights experts stated in 2021, forced organ harvesting in China appears to be targeting specific ethnic, linguistic, or religious minorities held in detention, often without being informed of the reasons for their arrest or being provided arrest warrants. Among those most frequently reported as targets are the Falun Gong practitioners and the Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang province. These detainees, often imprisoned for their beliefs, are subjected to medical procedures that other prisoners are not. Blood draws, organ examinations, ultrasound scans. These are not for their health. These are the results are then entered into a database, turning them into a human inventory for a state-run organ harvesting system. This is barbaric. These crimes, they are abuses by the Chinese Communist Party, and I think we can all agree that they have to come to an end. The legislation before us today, the Falun Gong Protection Act, takes long overdue action to confront this horror. It directs the U.S. government to identify and publicly name individuals and entities involved in forced organ harvesting in China. It imposes targeted sanction under the Global Magnitsky Act, including visa bans, asset freezes against those responsible. It strengthens reporting requirements for the State Department, ensuring that U.S. foreign policy fully accounts for the scope of organ trafficking abuses. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may use. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1540. Like H.R. 1503, the Falun Gong Protection Act also imposes sanctions on individuals who knowingly and directly engage in or facilitate the involuntary harvesting of organs within the People's Republic of China, while strengthening reporting requirements regarding this heinous crime. These steps are vital to address the forcible harvesting of organs, a grave violation of human rights and bodily autonomy. The PRC has been accused of forcibly harvesting organs from victims who range from prisoners of conscience, including religious and spiritual adherents, to ethnic minorities. Shining a spotlight on these crimes and the people that perpetrate them while advancing accountability is essential. The reporting requirements in this bill will help us better understand the scope of these terrible abuses and allow us to address them more effectively. This reporting relies on the very offices and experts at the State Department, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the National Institutes of Health that are being gutted currently by the Trump administration. A gift for traffickers and criminals that only illustrates just how dangerous the administration's proposed reorganization and so-called streamlining of government has been for United States national security. The sanctions in this bill may help to hold perpetrators accountable and deter the practice as well. We cannot remain silent in the face of such cruelty. We must stand with the victims, show them they are not forgotten, and ensure that perpetrators face justice. I thank my colleagues for their leadership on this effort and other efforts to tackle this heinous crime. I encourage my colleagues to join in supporting the measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the sponsor of this legislation, Mr. Perry.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman for allowing this bill to come to the floor. I'm here today to urge support of and for H.R. 1540, the Falun Gong Protection Act, a bill I have introduced to confront one of the most egregious, barbaric, medieval human rights atrocities of our current time. As we stand on the precipice of this vote, I ask you to join me in taking a stand against the Chinese Communist Party's systematic persecution of Falun Gong practitioners. Since the early 1990s, the Falun Gong, a spiritual practice rooted in the principles of truth, compassion, and tolerance, has been targeted by the Chinese Communist Party. By 1999, Mr. Speaker, an estimated 70 to 100 million people, roughly 5 to 7% of China's population, were practicing Falun Gong. This popularity triggered a brutal response from the CCP, unleashing a campaign of illegal detentions, forced labor, torture, and most horrifically, forced organ harvesting, a practice that amounts to mass murder. On July 20th, 1999, the CCP detained hundreds of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners and banned their practice outright. Since then, the persecution has only intensified. Multiple studies, including the 2020 report from the Independent Tribunal into Forced Organ Harvesting, have exposed an incomprehensible gap between the number of organ transplants performed in China and the number of registered donors. Mr. Speaker, the math simply doesn't add up, and we all know why. Just think about it. An independent tribunal into forced organ harvesting. An organization literally had to be set up to look into this because China is a closed society, and regardless of what people might think we're allowed to travel to China, they're not showing you this part. The CCP's secrecy ensures that China remains closed to scrutiny, but the evidence is clear. Falun Gong practitioners are the primary victims of this barbaric organ harvesting system. The tribunal's findings are staggering. They concluded that forced organ harvesting has been committed for years on a massive scale with Falun Gong practitioners as the main source. The report states that the CCP and its leaders have actively incited the persecution, imprisonment, murder, torture, and humiliation of these individuals solely to eradicate their beliefs. This is not just a violation of human rights, it's a crime against humanity. Now here, far away in the United States, many in the organ transplant community are unaware of China's illicit practices, shielded by the CCP's repressive control of information and global propaganda. But the truth is undeniable. The Chinese Communist Party has built an infrastructure to persecute millions, not only Falun Gong practitioners, but also Uyghurs, Tibetans, Christians, and others it deems a threat. The CCP's utter disregard for human life shocks the conscience. This barbaric practice must end, and it must end now. H.R. 1540 is a historic step forward, the first binding commitment by Congress to take decisive legal action against the persecution and forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. This bill imposes sanctions on those who would participate in or facilitate forced organ harvesting in China. It directs the Secretary of State to investigate whether the CCP's actions constitute crimes against humanity or genocide, and to report on China's organ transplant policies. It also establishes U.S. policy to reject any cooperation with the PRC's illicit organ transplant industry while the CCP remains in power. Colleagues, this bill paves the way for accountability, sanctions, punishment, and acknowledgement of those complicit in these atrocities. 30 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States cannot continue to stand idly by. We must use our authority. We must use our position as leaders in the world to curb these practices and send a clear message to everybody that not only we will not tolerate this assault on human dignity, on humanity itself, but that no country, that no people should. That is why I urge a vote in favor of H.R. 1540. Let us stand together, not just for Falun Gong practitioners, but for the millions suffering under the CCP's oppression, the tyranny. Let us affirm that the United States will always champion truth, compassion, and tolerance. And I thank the chair again for bringing the bill to the floor. Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance.
The member from Florida reserves. Gentleman from Maryland, you're recognized.
No further requests at this time. Prepare to close.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers, and we'll reserve until the gentleman yields his time.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 1540 will help Congress better understand the scope of organ harvesting and will enable for the sanctioning of individuals who knowingly engage in or facilitate this horrendous crime. I hope my colleagues will join me and support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this bill signals that the United States will not tolerate the use of state violence to extract profit from the bodies of the persecuted. I want to thank my friend, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry, along with his bipartisan co-sponsors for their leadership on this critical human rights issue. I urge strong support of this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1540? Those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? It's an opinion of the chair that 2/3 being affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid to the table.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1503.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1503, a bill to combat forced organ harvesting and trafficking in persons for purposes of the removal of organs and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mass, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Olszewski, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous materials on this measure.
Without objection.
I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchange of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
Thank you, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we gathered today to confront one of the most unconscionable human rights atrocities of our time. It's amazing that we have to speak about this. The state-sponsored forced harvesting of human organs. Innocent people, often prisoners of conscience, are being killed so that their vital organs can be removed and sold. This is a billion-dollar black market built on murder. It's a direct assault on every principle of human dignity and decency. H.R. 1503, the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act of 2025, is a bipartisan moral imperative. It holds perpetrators accountable and targets the heart of this depraved industry. The bill sends a clear message: the United States will not be complicit. If you take part in forced organ harvesting, we are coming after you. It imposes strong sanctions, strengthens reporting requirements, and authorizes the denial and revocation of passports for convicted traffickers who cross borders to commit these crimes. I would say that's the least that we could be doing. The legislation rightly identifies those responsible, including members of the Chinese Communist Party, who have been credibly accused by human rights organizations and UN experts for orchestrating systemic, state-run organ harvesting, primarily targeting prisoners of conscience from religious and ethnic minority groups. This is not speculation. The evidence is overwhelming. International investigations, eyewitness testimony, and growing data confirm that these abuses are occurring on a massive scale. They are crimes against humanity. The bill is a necessary tool to fight that evil. It aligns our foreign policy with our core values: human rights, rule of law, and the sanctity of life. And as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I am proud to support it. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Smith of New Jersey, and Mr. Keating of Massachusetts for leading this bipartisan effort. The bill passed the Foreign Affairs Committee with broad bipartisan support, and I urge my colleagues to join in advancing it on the floor today. We must make it unmistakably clear: forced organ harvesting will not be tolerated. Will not be tolerated in this world, and those who carry it out, support it, or profit from it will face serious consequences. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1503, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank Representatives Smith and Keating for introducing this bill, which, as the chairman mentioned, passed in the 118th Congress. I also want to thank my colleague and chairman for bringing this and many other important bipartisan bills to the floor today. According to the State Department's Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, the trafficking in persons for the purpose of organ removal is one of the least reported and least understood forms of trafficking, but one that experts believe may be growing. Like sex trafficking and labor trafficking, it is ultimately a crime that exploits human beings for economic profit. The State Department's 2023 Human Rights Report highlights troubling allegations regarding the government of the People's Republic of China forcibly harvesting organs from prisoners of conscience, including religious and spiritual adherents. Mr. Speaker, I worry deeply about the administration's proposed State Department's reorganization plans that would gut the funding and experts working to address these crimes, giving the PRC and others a pass. Instead of these cuts, the administration should be strengthening efforts to address forced organ harvesting and trafficking. H.R. 1503 shines a light on this horrible practice and calls on the State Department to make its annual reporting on the issue more robust and more in-depth. Not only does it call for more regular assessments of the problem, it also authorizes the imposition of sanctions on individuals that are involved in forced organ harvesting or trafficking. The legislation will make sure the U.S. is carefully gathering all the facts to make an informed assessment on the magnitude and prevalence of this problem and developing appropriate responses. The trafficking of persons for the purpose of organ removal is a form of trafficking in which an individual is exploited for their organs, including by coercion, deception, and abuse of a position of vulnerability. It's abhorrent, repugnant, and dehumanizing. I support this legislation and urge all of my colleagues to likewise support it again this Congress. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 6 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, the sponsor of this legislation, and the chairman of the Subcommittee on Africa, Mr. Smith.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thank you, the distinguished chairman, for his support and for yielding this time. Mr. Speaker, every year under Xi Jinping and his Chinese Communist Party, tens of thousands of young women and men, average age 28, are murdered in cold blood to steal their internal organs for profit or to be transplanted into Communist Party cadres, leaders, and members alike. These crimes against humanity are unimaginably cruel and painful. Between 2 and 6 internal organs per victim are extracted. It is murder masquerading as medicine. Ethnic groups targeted include Uyghurs, who suffer from Xi Jinping's ongoing genocide, and the Falun Gong, whose peaceful meditation and exercise practices and exceptional good health make their organs highly desirable. The Chinese Communist Party has declared the Falun Gong practitioners to be an evil cult, fit for butchering. Mr. Speaker, over the years, I have chaired several hearings on this barbaric abuse. And 2 years ago, on March 27th, the House passed my bill, the Forced Organ Harvesting Act of 2023, 413 to 2. Like many other House-passed bills, however, it died in the Senate. If approved today, I respectfully appeal to the Senate to pass it this time. Special thanks to Majority Leader Scalise, Chairman Mast, Ranking Member Meeks for ensuring reconsideration in this new Congress, and special thanks to Bill Keating for co-sponsoring. Mr. Speaker, I have chaired several hearings over the years on forced organ harvesting, beginning over a quarter of a century ago. In June of 1998, 27 years ago, I chaired my first hearing on forced organ harvesting in China. A Chinese security officer who testified that he and other security agents were executing patients with the doctors right there, the ambulances right there, ready to put them in the back to take their organs after the bullets were fired. At one hearing in September of 2015, Ethan Gutman, a true expert, author of the book The Slaughter, Mass Killings, Organ Harvesting, and China's Secret Solution to its Dissident Problem, and he's testified more than a half a dozen times before our hearings. He pointed out in 1994 the first live organ harvest of death row prisoners was performed on the execution grounds of Xinjiang in northwest China. He points out that over the years, it just kept building, growing. And then by the year 2005, the apparatus was in place in order to systematically slaughter all of these wonderful people in order to take their organs. Ethan Gutman today says that the prisoners in Xinjiang are being harvested at a rate that translates annually, every year, into 25,000 to 50,000 victims. 25 to 50,000 Uyghurs alone, Kazakhs and other Central Asians. And he also points out that if you use the lower number, we're talking about 175,000 murdered victims, all young people, for their organs in a very, very short period of time. The Falun Dafa information, which does a lot of good work for the Falun Gong, too, points out while it's very hard to get precise information, it is a dictatorship in a closed society. They said the number had jumped even by 2018 to 20,000 victims. At another hearing, forced organ harvesting in China, we heard expert testimony from Sir Jeffrey Nice, who conducted the first global independent legal analysis of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China. Sir Jeffrey Nice said, and I quote him, "Forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale." He said Falun Gong and the Uyghurs and the PRC each qualify as a group for purposes of the crime of genocide. Robert Destro, the Assistant Secretary for State and Democracy and Human Rights, testified as well at that hearing and said the size and scope of organ harvesting and organ trafficking market are staggering. Mr. Speaker, we also know that there are hospitals dedicated just to dealing and helping to assist Chinese Communist Party leaders. And where do they get there? One of them is the Army Hospital 301 in Beijing. And where do they get these victims? From the very group of people that they hate so much, the Uyghurs and the Falun Gong and some others. We've introduced again this year, the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act to amend the Foreign Assistance Act to require the imposition of serious sanctions on any person the President determines funds, sponsors, or otherwise facilitates forced organ harvesting or trafficking for purposes of the removal of organs. If enacted into law, it requires very comprehensive reporting on this, which has not happened. It needs to happen. So what does all this mean, really? It means civil penalties of up to $250,000 and criminal penalties, including a fine of up to $1 million and imprisonment for not more than 20 years or both. So, Mr. Speaker, we are serious about sanctioning this egregious human rights abuse. Sanctions also include blocking and prohibiting all transactions in property and interest in property and making ineligible to come to this country if they're a foreigner a visa. State-sponsored forced organ harvesting is big business for Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, and we will not rest and we cannot rest until we stop it. I want to thank the organizations to my left, a group of 9 organizations, there's 10, another one has joined in, to call for passage and support for this bill. These are great human rights organizations. Again, we must act now, we must act decisively. The lives of so many lie in the balance. I yield back to my good friend, any balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No further requests for time. I'm prepared to close if the other side has no speakers.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I have no more speakers. Did he yield back?
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may use for the purpose of closing. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 1503 is an important bipartisan measure. We know that organ harvesting has been a problem in different places around the globe. We don't know yet the full extent of the problem, and it's certainly a practice that is difficult to detect and track. But the bill before us is a strong and important step forward. It calls on the State Department to provide important information to Congress, to the American public, and to the world about the global scope of organ harvesting and trafficking. This bill will help inform Congress so that we can ensure the U.S. can respond appropriately. I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the United States has to lead with moral clarity. We have to send an unmistakable message. The human body is not a currency. It's not a commodity. It's never for sale. Forced organ harvesting is pure evil, and if we don't act, then we'll be considered complicit. I urge every one of my colleagues to stand firm for human dignity and support H.R. 1503. And I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Florida yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1503? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection.
Mr. Recorded vote.
Does the gentleman request the yeas and nays?
Yes.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.